3 days before my son's retirement party, I stopped by Harpel's Jewelers on King Street to pick up the engraved watch I'd ordered as a gift. The woman behind the counter, Odette, who had sold my late husband his cufflinks 20 years ago, looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. She glanced toward the back of the shop, then back at me, and said very quietly, "Come with me, now. Don't ask questions yet." I almost laughed. Odette is not a dramatic woman. She wears the same pearl earrings every day and speaks in complete sentences. So when she pulled me behind the velvet curtain into the repair room and shut the door, I knew she meant it. She pressed one finger to her lips. The wall beside us was thin. I could hear voices from the private consultation room next door. My son-in-law's voice, smooth, certain, the way he always sounds when he's closing a deal. Once the power of attorney transfers, we move the RRSPs first. She won't notice for at least 60 days. By then, we file for the probate override and she's already in care. Then a woman's voice. Younger. Hesitant. My daughter. Hesitant. My daughter. She's not sick, though. How do we explain that to a doctor? We don't explain it. Dr. Westhaven handles that part. That's what we're paying him for. I stood in that small back room, surrounded by watch gears and velvet trays, and I stopped breathing. Odette's hand found my arm. She held on. The voices continued for another few minutes. Transfer timelines, account numbers, the name of a facility in Barrie, something called Millbrook Gardens, then footsteps, a door, and silence. Odette turned on the overhead light. Her eyes were full. "They were here Tuesday," she said. "Same conversation. I recognized your daughter's voice from the Christmas party 2 years ago. I didn't know what to do. I almost called you. Then today, you walked in. I picked up my handbag from the counter. I heard myself say, 'Can I have the watch, please?' She blinked. The watch? The one I ordered for my son's party. She disappeared into the front and came back with a small blue box. I took it. I thanked her. I walked out into the October air on King Street in Guelph, and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment while people walked past me with their coffee cups and their grocery bags, living their ordinary lives. The drive home takes 11 minutes. I counted everyone. My name is Helen Whitbourne. I am 63 years old. I am a retired property assessor for the County of Wellington, and I live alone in the house my husband Kenneth and I bought in 1994. A red brick 2-story on Woodlawn Road with a sugar maple in the front yard that turns the color of fire every October. Kenneth died 5 years ago. A stroke. A Tuesday afternoon in March. Very quick. He was 59. What they were planning to take, the house, assessed at just under $900,000. Kenneth's RRSP transferred to me at his death, now sitting at $340,000. A small investment portfolio, $210,000. And a life insurance payout I had never touched, $150,000 in a separate account I'd opened the week after the funeral, because I couldn't look at it. Total. Just under $1.6 million. Everything Kenneth and I had spent 31 years building. My daughter's name is Joanna. She's 36. My son-in-law is a man named Callum, who she met at a conference in Ottawa 6 years ago. He works in financial consulting. He is handsome in the way that men who know they're handsome tend to be, and he has always called me Helen in a tone that makes it sound slightly impolite. My son Owen's party. I crossed that name off the list. New name. My son Brendan's retirement party was in 3 days. He had done 28 years with the OPP, Ontario Provincial Police, and was retiring at 52 with a full pension. The watch I'd just picked up had his badge number engraved on the back, and the words, "The job was never who you were. Mom." I sat in my car in the driveway and did not go inside for a long time. The thing about hearing something you cannot unhear is that your mind immediately starts building a wall around it, trying to make it make sense, trying to find a version of events where you misunderstood, where there's a reasonable explanation, where your daughter is not standing in a jewelry shop in Guelph planning to hand you over to a stranger in Barrie while she empties your accounts. I could not find that version. I went inside. My housekeeper Phyllis was in the kitchen making soup. She's been coming on Thursdays for 12 years, since Kenneth got sick the first time, and I needed help. She's 67 and bakes her own bread and has never once said a single unkind word about anyone in my presence. You look pale, she said. I'm fine. Sit down. I sat down. She put a cup of tea in front of me and went back to her soup and didn't ask anything else. And I have never loved her more than I did in that moment. At 6 o'clock that evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Joanna. Looking forward to Saturday, Mom. Callum picked up a nice bottle of Riesling for the toast. Love you. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back. Can't wait. Love you too. I put the phone face down on the table. There is a lawyer in Guelph named Françoise Beaumont who handled Kenneth's estate. She's thorough and honest and once told me, during the worst week of my life, that I could call her any time, day or night, if I needed to understand something. At 8:15 that Thursday evening, I found out she meant it. She answered on the second ring. Helen. No preamble. What's wrong? I told her everything. The jewellery shop or debt. The voices through the wall. My son-in-law's voice saying Dr. Westhaven handles that part. My daughter's voice asking how they'd explain it to a doctor. Françoise was quiet for a moment. Power of attorney. Do you currently have one in place? Yes. Joanna is named. Kenneth and I set it up in 2019 after his first health scare. Okay. Another pause. Have you signed anything recently? Any documents Callum may have presented as routine? Tax forms, estate updates, anything? I thought back. 3 months ago, Callum had brought over a folder of what he called updated beneficiary designations. He'd been very casual about it, sitting at my kitchen table, explaining each page in a pleasant voice while Joanna poured coffee. I'd signed 4 pages. I hadn't read them carefully. I trusted him. He was family. I told Françoise this. She said, I need you to find those documents tonight. Look for anything with Callum's firm letterhead or the words financial directive or proxy amendment. Can you do that? I found them in 40 minutes, in a manila envelope in the second drawer of my filing cabinet, exactly where I remembered putting them. I photographed each page and sent them to Françoise's email. She called back at 10:15. Helen, page 3, section 4.2. This is not a beneficiary update. I had the documents open in front of me. What is it? It's an amendment to your existing power of attorney. It expands the scope to include your investment accounts and gives Joanna and Callum as co-signatory the authority to liquidate assets without your signature, provided a physician has certified that you're experiencing cognitive difficulties. I read the section myself. The words blurred a little. And the physician, I said. Dr. Westhaven. I don't know that name, but if they've arranged for a diagnosis, that's the smoking gun. Helen, if this gets filed, and if a doctor submits a cognitive assessment, you could lose access to your own accounts within 72 hours. What do I do? First, you do not let on that you know anything. Second, I file an emergency application first thing Friday morning to have that amendment invalidated. It was signed under false pretenses. You believed it was a beneficiary form. Third, we find out who Dr. Westhaven is and what he's already submitted, if anything. She paused. Is there anyone you trust completely? Someone who can help you move quickly? I thought of Brendan. My son, the one retiring Saturday. 28 years as an OPP officer, a man who had spent nearly 3 decades learning exactly how people try to get away with things. Yes, I said. There's my son. I called Brendan at 10:45. He picked up on the first ring because he always does, even at 10:45, even after a full shift. I told him everything. He was quiet for a moment. Then, are you safe right now? Yes. Don't Callum. Don't talk to anyone else tonight. I'll be there at 7 in the morning. He was there at 6:50. He sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee and listened to everything again, this time with the documents spread out in front of him. He's a large, quiet man, my son. He has Kenneth's eyes and Kenneth's way of going very still when he's thinking hard. Westhaven, he said. That name. You know it. Maybe. He pulled out his phone. Give me a few hours. By noon on Friday, Brendan had made 9 phone calls and driven to 2 different addresses. He came back to my house at 1:30 with a folder and a look on his face that I recognized. He'd had the same look the day he told me Kenneth's prognosis. Sit down, Mum. I sat. Norman Westhaven. He's a geriatric psychiatrist out of Barry. Lost his hospital privileges at RVH in 2021, Royal Victoria Regional Health Centre, following a complaint from a patient's family. The complaint alleged he had submitted a falsified cognitive assessment. Brendan opened the folder. The college investigated. He received a caution. No suspension. He's still practicing privately. He's done this before. Twice that I can confirm. A man in Aurelia, 2020, 78 years old. Wife had already passed. His son took everything under power of attorney, sold the house, put him in a memory care home. West Haven had filed a diagnosis of moderate dementia. Brendan paused. There's no evidence the man was ever properly assessed. What happened to him? He died in the home 14 months later. The kitchen was very quiet, October light coming through the window, and the sugar maple outside doing what it does every year, turning itself brilliant and brief. And the second one, a woman in Collingwood, 71. Her daughter had power of attorney. Westhaven filed a report. Accounts were frozen, house was listed. Her nephew, a paralegal, caught it before the sale went through. He fought it for 8 months. She got the house back. Westhaven settled the civil claim privately. Records sealed. Brendan looked at me steadily. She's alive. And according to one of my former colleagues who knows the family, she's willing to talk. I closed my eyes for a moment. I thought about a woman in Collingwood who had gone through this and survived and was still, somehow, willing to put herself in front of it again. What's her name? Constance. He stopped. Sorry, I shouldn't. It's all right. What do we do now? He and Francois spoke by phone that afternoon. By 4 o'clock, Francois had filed the emergency application to invalidate the amended power of attorney. A judge would review it Saturday morning, the same day as Brendan's retirement party. Convenient timing, Brendan said, and almost smiled. I spent Friday evening going through every financial account I owned. Francois had advised me to add a second layer of security, a verbal password, a secondary contact to each one. I called my bank, my investment firm, my insurance company. 3 hours on the phone. Every single representative was professional and kind. Not one of them made me feel foolish for being a 63-year-old woman who had almost signed away her own life. Phyllis called at 8 to check on me. I told her I was fine, that I was doing some banking. She said she'd bring scones Saturday morning. I said thank you and hung up and sat in Kenneth's old chair in the study for a while, just to feel less alone. There is a photograph on the desk in that study. Kenneth and me at Niagara-on-the-Lake, 1991. We're standing in front of a winery we couldn't actually afford to buy anything from. We're laughing at something, I can't remember what. He has his arm around me and I am leaning into him, and we look so thoroughly, completely happy that it almost hurts to look at it. I said to the photograph, I'm not going to let them. Saturday came with frost on the grass and a hard blue sky. The retirement party was at the Guelph Legion on Crimea Street, the one with the good parking in the big hall. Brendan had not wanted a fuss, which meant 60 people, a catered spread from a place on Stone Road, and a slideshow his former partner had put together with an enthusiasm that Brendan had tried and failed to contain. I arrived early to help set up. Joanna and Callum were already there. Joanna looked beautiful, the way she always does. She has Kenneth's height and my stubbornness, and she was wearing a blue dress that I'd seen her try on over FaceTime 3 weeks ago. She hugged me at the door, warm and real, and I hugged her back and tried not to think about Thursday. Callum shook my hand. Helen, you look well. That tone. Thank you, Callum. So do you. He smiled. I smiled. We were both very good at this. By 7 o'clock the hall was full. Brendan's former colleagues, his partner of 16 years, his daughter and her husband who'd driven up from Hamilton, old family friends, people from the neighbourhood. The Legion served a roast beef and the slideshow made everyone laugh and then quietly tear up at the photos from the early years. Brendan young and serious in his uniform. His first post up near Sudbury, Kenneth at the ceremony when he made sergeant. The speeches began at 8. Brendan's partner spoke first. Then his daughter. Then me. I had written my speech 3 weeks ago. It was warm and funny, and talked about the little boy who used to leave his hockey gear in the front hall, and the man who had grown into someone his father would have been enormously proud of. I stood up and I gave that speech, and then I stopped. The room was quiet, expectant. People were smiling. Joanna was smiling. I looked at my daughter. I thought about Thursday. I thought about Odette's hand on my arm in that small room surrounded by watch parts. I thought about a man in Aurelia who died 14 months after a diagnosis he may never have had. And I set my written speech down on the podium. Brendan, I said, your father used to say that the most important thing a person can do is tell the truth, even when it costs them something. I think about that a lot lately. The room stayed quiet, but in a different way now. This week I found out that someone had been trying to take everything Kenneth and I spent our lives building, not a stranger, someone at this table. I heard Joanna pull in a breath. I'm going to tell you what happened because I think you deserve to know the truth, and because silence has never protected anyone. I looked at Callum first. His face had gone very still. I told them about the jewelry shop, about Odette, about the war between the rooms and the voice I recognized. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I spoke the way Francois had advised me to speak. Clearly, with the facts in order, without drama I didn't need. I told them about page 3, section 4.2. I told them about page 3, section 4.2. Norman Westhaven and his history with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. I told them about the man in Aurelia. I told them about the woman in Collingwood who had survived. I clicked the small remote in my hand. Brendan's former partner, who I had called Thursday night after I called Brendan, had set up a laptop and a screen at the side of the hall. A video began to play. A woman, perhaps 72, sitting in a bright living room in Collingwood with her hands folded in her lap. My name is not important, she said, and her voice was steady. What's important is that I know exactly how this works. I know what a Section 4.2 amendment looks like. I know what Norman Westhaven's reports say before he files them, because he tried it on me. She looked directly into the camera. If you are sitting in that room tonight and you think this could never happen to you, you're wrong. And if someone is fighting back, the best thing you can do is let them. The video ended. The hall was completely silent. Callum stood up. Helen, this is. Sit down, Callum. He didn't sit. He moved toward the door. Two of Brendan's former colleagues, I had asked Brendan to invite them specifically, and he had, without asking me why until Thursday night, stepped into the aisle. Callum stopped. Brendan stood up from his table and walked to the podium. He stood beside me and put his hand briefly on my shoulder. Then he turned to the room. Last night at 11:15, he said, the Ontario Court of Justice granted an emergency order invalidating the amendment to my mother's power of attorney. This morning, all accounts were secured. He paused. Dr. Norman Westhaven has been reported to the College of Physicians and Surgeons for the second time, this time with corroborating evidence from two separate families. The OPP Financial Crimes Unit is aware of this situation. He looked at Callum. They'll want to speak with you Monday morning. The room erupted, not loudly, not dramatically, the way a room full of older Canadians tends to process something terrible, in low voices, in turned heads, in hands reaching across tables to hold other hands. Joanna had not moved. She was sitting in her chair with her hands in her lap, staring at the table. Her face was the colour of the tablecloth. Callum tried twice more to reach the door. The second time, one of Brendan's colleagues said something quiet in his ear and he went very still, and then he sat back down. I turned the microphone off. I stepped down from the podium and I walked to my daughter. She looked up at me. Her eyes were streaming. Mum, not yet, I said. Tonight we just sit. I sat down beside her. She didn't speak. I didn't speak. Around us, the room slowly found its way back to itself. People getting more coffee, gathering coats, speaking to Brendan in low voices. Two officers walked Callum out at 9:15. He said nothing as he left. He didn't look at Joanna. She watched him go. Then she put her face in her hands. Phyllis had come to the party. She and Brendan have always been fond of each other. And she appeared beside us with a glass of water, set it down, and went away again without a word. I have never fully appreciated Phyllis until this year. At 10 o'clock, Brendan crouched down beside Joanna's chair. Did you know? He asked, not unkindly, just plainly. She shook her head, then stopped, then said, very quietly, not all of it. Brendan nodded once. He looked at me. I nodded back. Okay, he said. He straightened up and went back to his guests. We drove home separately, Joanna and I. She followed my car down Stone Road and pulled into my driveway behind me. We sat in the kitchen until midnight, the way we used to when she was in university and would come home for reading week with a bag of laundry and too much on her mind. She told me Callum had started with small things, comments about my memory, observations, delivered lightly, about how much I'd been working on the house alone, whether I really needed to be managing finances at my age. He'd said it in the way of someone who cares, and she had wanted to believe it was care. He said Dr. Westhaven was a friend, she said. Someone who could do an informal assessment just to make sure you were all right. Did you meet him? Once. He came to dinner in August. He asked me questions about you. I thought. She stopped. I thought he was being helpful. When did you start to wonder? She was quiet for a while. September. Callum had me sign some documents for his firm. He said they were tax-related. He was moving fast, explaining things quickly the way he does when he doesn't want questions. She looked at her hands. I asked him to slow down. He got angry. That was the first time he'd gotten angry with me. Why didn't you come to me? She looked up. Her eyes were red. Because I'd already signed things. Because I was ashamed. Because I didn't want to believe that I had let someone into your life who would do this. The kitchen was quiet. And because, she said, even more quietly, he'd been telling me for 2 years that you were struggling. And part of me, a small, terrible part, thought maybe he was right. You'd been alone for 5 years. You were getting older. Maybe you really did need looking after. And did you believe that? She looked at me for a long time. I wanted to. That's worse, isn't it? I wanted a reason to step in, and he gave me one. I thought about that. I thought about all the dinners I'd left early to answer work emails, even after I'd retired. All the Christmases I'd been distracted by the house, the finances, the endless projects I kept starting because sitting still felt too much like giving up. I thought about Joanna at 22 calling me from her first apartment in Waterloo, and me listening with one ear while I sorted Kenneth's paperwork. I made it easy for him, I said. Not to excuse what she'd done, just because it was true. She shook her head. Don't. I'm not taking the blame for Callum, but I know I wasn't always present. I paused. Your father was better at that than I was. She started crying again. Quietly, the way she does, like she's trying not to take up too much space. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. I know. Mum, Joanna, you're my daughter. That is not a negotiable fact, but we have a lot of talking to do. Not tonight. She nodded. She slept in her old room, in the twin bed with the blue duvet she'd had since grade 10. I sat in Kenneth's chair in the study until 2 in the morning. The months that followed were not quiet. Callum was charged in January. The OPP Financial Crimes Unit, working with the RCMP, had found evidence of similar schemes in 2 other provinces, a family in New Brunswick, another in British Columbia. He had apparently developed a methodology. He was practiced at it. His bail was set at $150,000 and was posted within 48 hours, which told me something about resources I hadn't known he had. Dr. Westhaven surrendered his license to practice in November, 6 weeks after the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario issued a formal notice of hearing. He did not fight it. The woman from Collingwood, along with the family of the man from Orillia, filed civil suits. I submitted a formal complaint and a supporting statement. I was told the hearing could take years. I said that was fine. I wasn't going anywhere. The amended power of attorney was formally invalidated by the court in December. Francois filed updated documents giving Brendan co-authority alongside Joanna, not to replace her but to add a check. Joanna agreed without argument. She signed everything Francois put in front of her, this time reading every page. I kept the house. I kept every account. Kenneth's RSP, the portfolio, the insurance money I had never spent. All of it exactly where we'd put it. Morrison Consulting, I stopped, pulled that back, wrong story. I mean, Brendan threw himself into his retirement with the same intensity he'd applied to everything else. He started a kitchen renovation. He volunteered with the OPP auxiliary. He drove me to Francoise's office 3 times. He called every Sunday without fail. Joanna moved out of the house she'd shared with Callum and into a small condo on Edinburgh Road in Guelph. She got a job with the county. She has a background in urban planning and started coming to Sunday dinners in February. At first, we talked around things: the weather, her work, the renovation at Brendan's house, the sugar maple in my front yard. In March, she told me she'd started seeing a counsellor. In April, she asked if she could bring someone to Easter dinner. A colleague, she said. Just a colleague. His name was Tom, and he was a civil engineer who had read every plaque in the Wellington County Museum and thought this was perfectly normal. I liked him immediately. She looked at me over the Easter table, and I gave her the smallest nod, and she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 6 months. She had been. I think we both had. In May, I found an envelope on my desk. Handwritten. Joanna's writing. 4 pages. She had written down everything, the beginning with Callum, the moment she'd started to feel trapped, the shame she'd carried through those months. The night of Brendan's party, when she'd watched me stand at that podium and felt something she described as relief, so complicated I don't have a word for it. The last paragraph said, "I know I don't deserve trust back yet. I'm not asking for it. I'm asking you to know that I see you. I see what you built. I see what I almost helped someone take. And I see you, Mum, not the person who needed protecting, but the person who has never in my entire life needed protecting. You are the strongest person I know. I'm sorry it took losing everything to remind me of that." I read it 3 times. I went out to the front yard and stood under the sugar maple for a while. It was May, still green, none of the October fire yet. I wrote back. 2 pages. "Joanna, I am not an easy person to be the daughter of. I know that. Your father was the one who remembered birthdays without a calendar, who sat with you when you were anxious, who made the ordinary days feel celebrated. I kept the accounts balanced. I kept the house running. I told myself that was enough. It wasn't always enough. Callum found a door I had left open by accident, and I have had to sit with that. I'm not saying it was your fault or mine. I am saying we both have things to do differently going forward. I forgive you. I don't know yet what we look like on the other side of this, but I know we're going to find out. I love you. Don't stop calling on Sundays." Mom. I mailed it on a Thursday. She received it Friday. She called that evening, not Sunday, and we talked for an hour. Last week, I was standing in Harpel's Jewelers on King Street, returning to pick up a bracelet I'd had repaired, a gold chain of my mother's that had snapped back in the spring. Odette was behind the counter, as she always is, in her pearl earrings. She looked at the bracelet. "Good as new," she said. "Thank you." I took it. I stood there for a moment. "Odette, I want you to know what you did, bringing me into that back room. I've thought about it every day since October." She shook her head. "I just opened a door. You opened the right one." She reached across the counter and squeezed my hand briefly, the way a person does when words have run out. I walked out onto King Street into a November morning, cold and clear, the kind of day where everything looks freshly rinsed. I put my mother's bracelet on my wrist and stood for a moment on the sidewalk. Kenneth used to say that the worst things that happen to us are also the ones that show us exactly who we are. I used to think that was a bit too tidy, a bit too much like a lesson. I'm not sure I think that anymore. I know who I am. I know who my son is. I know who my daughter is becoming, which is something different from who she was, and something I want to be present for. That, I think, is the only thing worth protecting.